Facebook. Make sure we get everything right. And now we're going to go with YouTube. All right, what's going on, everybody? Hope everyone's enjoying their Wednesday. Welcome to the POWLAX podcast. In this episode, we will be talking about free play and a podcast with Ted Crokin and Jamie Monroe that I just had the pleasure of listening to while I took Turner on a walk before he took his nap. Thank you for adjusting to the times. It's always nice when I hit YouTube and I see that there are a few people waiting to watch the live stream. That's always pretty encouraging. As always, if you cannot catch this live, you can always catch it tomorrow for the POWLAX podcast. It's on basically all podcast sites. We've got a few big announcements to hit, and I just kind of had to run down here basically, thank you for dealing with the time change. Everyone who likes to catch everything live, we'll probably get a little bit different of a group today, simply because we're not doing the podcast at like 9:15. But the reason is because Turner came down with something. It's like a little cough. Not really sure. I kind of have a runny nose too, but we held Turner out from school. And so, that's why I basically just had to wait till his nap. So it's back to the original days of the POWLAX podcast where I'd have to wait till nap time anyway. So, this might be happening a couple times. Who kind of knows with the current situation? We're going to touch on some of those things, but that should only take like 2 minutes. So this will not be a doom and gloom podcast. So rest assured. Let's see, just to get through quick announcements. We've got one humongous announcement that I'm extremely excited to actually get to be able to tell you guys now. And then we've got the usual suspects. So before we get to the huge announcement, here's the usual suspects. If you're looking to save money on lacrosse balls, buy Pearl lacrosse balls. Save 10% on your order now by using Pearl lacrosse ball or using code POWLAX at pearllacrosse.com. Next, if you're looking for some kind of target for goals, check out the Flip Goalies. You can also get 10% off your order at Flip Goalie and by using POWLAX on that site as well. I really need to get like a recording for this because I'm absolutely terrible at doing these things where I'm putting them in. Let's see. Also, really, this podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/POWLAX, where you can download the playbook PDF for every single POWLAX video. It's not actually every single POWLAX video. It's most of the videos. But either way, by becoming a patron, you help support the channel and you allow me to create more video lacrosse coaching content. Let's see. Oh, so Tim said, kids ruling the roost. Yes, exactly. I'm on Turner's schedule for sure. I'm definitely not on my own schedule. That's definitely true. Okay. So, here we go. Our humongous announcement is Wendy and I are expecting our second child in September. I hope it's September. It better be September. But so we are extremely excited because our first child was conceived through IVF, which was, a very big, huge sacrifice. And this one was natural. And so we're extremely excited. So we will be joining chaplain number 4 coming to you in September. And so, yeah, we're thrilled. We're super excited. So that's definitely something that I'm really pumped for. I've known for a while, obviously, but couldn't tell you. And it was actually funny because I want to say there was a day. So Wendy told me right before one of the live streams. And so it was really weird because she's like, check your texts. And so I got that on my phone because I was about to start the live stream on Instagram. And then I see on my Mac, because my iMessages was up, and the Mac said, and it was just, the picture of the test. And so very, very cool. Super excited super excited to have another kid. Turner's great. I'm excited. The person doing the ultrasound a couple days ago said that it looks like a girl. So wish me luck, and everyone pray for Wendy when she hits 14, 15 and hits those teenage years, because I hear those are doozies. Okay, so now let's get into the other thing. So I have to touch on this because it is pertinent to, life right now if you live basically anywhere in the world. So I'm going to touch on this. It's going to take me about 2 minutes. I want to talk about how long I've been following it and kind of give you my perspective on this whole. Everyone knows what it is. I'm not going to say the word because if I say the word, it'll demonetize. It's not like it really matters because I want to say I get like 100 views on the live streams anyway. But so clearly there's this sickness going around and everyone's either on one of two camps. Either the world is ending or it's just like the flu and who cares. So here's where I come in. I'm lucky enough to be able to listen to the news quite a bit during my days. So I've known about this since late December. And every single step of the way, it was no big deal, no big deal, no big deal. Spread, spread, spread. Cluster, cluster, cluster. Boom, boom, boom. Huge, huge overhauls, right? Obviously in China. Huge overhauls now in Italy. It's funny if you look back at the things a little while ago in Italy, it was like, hey, we got a couple people, and now it's overwhelming their entire system. So I'm going to touch on 2 points and really what I think about it, and then we're going to move on. Actually, we're going to talk about a couple other things within it too, but those are more so lacrosse related. So one is that the NESCAC has canceled all spring sports, and so I actually think this is a good decision for the following reasons. First, for everyone who's saying it's just like the flu, it's not. And the reason that it's not is not because, so first it's got a higher death rate, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is the fact that it's hospitalizing a lot of people. And so and it's very, very early. So if you want to learn kind of where I've learned about it, the Joe Rogan podcast from yesterday was very enlightening. The guy who studies diseases basically said it's extremely early and it's basically just going to keep, swarming everywhere. But the problem is not necessarily that it's going to, wipe out everyone. It's that there's going to be so many people that get sick enough to go to the hospital that there's not going to be any more hospital beds. So if you're out playing lacrosse and you break your leg, you're not going to be able to go to a hospital because no one's going to be able to treat you. And so one of the things that he mentioned yesterday was that a person that works in his organization got a text from a nurse in Italy that said they're essentially having to choose who they let die because they don't have enough people. They don't have enough beds. They don't have enough things to do. So it's not necessarily the, how bad it is, especially for young people. For older people, it looks worse. And for smokers, it looks really, really bad. But that's the issue more so than, it's going to kill us all. So it's important to kind of know that, I think, because for all the people who are thinking that it's just some over protocol thing with the NESCAC, not, having things happen, it's not necessarily all about whether it's going to have a high death rate. It's more so about the fact that if so many people go into the hospitals, all the emergency functions shut down. And that's what people are really, really, not trying to have. And so that's kind of where I am. I endorse. I figured actually about 2 weeks ago, I told I told most of my family, just make sure you have enough stuff for, 2 weeks if they do quarantine. Cause I saw the China quarantine way early and they thought it was nothing. So it's been interesting to watch it for 2-3 months because everywhere it's hit, it's gone past what they thought it would. Cool. So that's enough of that. So, I really hope it doesn't shut down our season. Oh, last thing on this topic. The guy also said you can't shut down all the schools because most nurses and most people in the healthcare profession have kids. How are we going to help sick people how are they going to have their kids watched? Where are they going to go? So it's a huge issue, but we'll kind of see what happens as we go. Give me 1 second. Gotta text something. There you go. Perfect. Cool. So, all right, moving on completely. I'm really excited for this topic today because I just had the opportunity to watch and listen to Ted Croton and Jamie Monroe. I listened to it when it first came out a while ago. But so Ted Croton is a co-founder and artistic director of Joy of the People Soccer. And it is essentially a soccer program that's really based on free play, like all over the board. And so if you know Jamie Monroe, his Jam 3 stuff and his podcast is, I'd say it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 podcasts for lacrosse. I'd say it's probably top podcast. For me, it is because I'm a coach, right? And so he interviews coaches. And so I really, really enjoy it. And so it's definitely something that if you are a coach, I really recommend listening to. This one specifically is very cool because it talks about the distinctions between and some of Jamie's like thought processes as he's been working through how he develops players. And it talks about, what really matters for development. And so we're going to segue really quick because I want to give a shout out to Henry Solzbacher, who I've given shout outs to before. But so he is helping out. I want to say it's University of Montana. If you have players who want to play in college, it's going to be a good place to play. It's not somewhere that they're going to have lacrosse be their life, but it's going to be somewhere where they're serious enough that it feels like, good college lacrosse. But as we started talking the other day, his goal, like the thing that I really want to make sure that I'm doing for the lacrosse, for lacrosse throughout the country, is that the information that I put out is going to help create an environment for players to make them fall in love with the game. Because once players fall in love with the game, they'll take the game and do their own thing. It's the main reason why So Your Kid Wants to Play Lacrosse, the first series, is What is Lacrosse? And it's not about rules. It's not about regulations. It's about, this is a game. The game can be played in any way you want. It can be played 1-on-1, 2v2, 3v3, yada, yada. It doesn't have to be this structured thing, even though structure can give younger players a lot more. They can have more success because other players won't have the structure, but it limits them eventually. And so Henry moved to Montana thinking, hey, I'm going to go create this youth program. I'm going to create this whole thing. And when he got there, he was met with a lot of challenges. And so we didn't dive too deep into this, but, one of the biggest things that he mentioned was that he's going to use 3x a lot more than he would have in other places, and that 3x is something that he's going to be able to use. If you don't know what 3x is, it's essentially take back basketball with 3v3, but lacrosse. And so if you listen to the podcast, which is listed in the description on YouTube as well as on the podcast, there is a game that's been going on for about 20 years on Thursday nights in Wash Park in Denver. And basically people come from all around. They play 3x. It's a great game. I haven't been in, probably since even way before Turner was born. Like, it's been a long time since I've been out there. I've got to make it a point to get out there on one of these Thursday nights. But the whole idea in the podcast, and something that was that me and Henry talked about, was that playing the game really sells the game. And so I'm going to run through a few of the points that were made within this podcast and kind of just talk through what it really means in each spot. So here are the questions that I want to have answered. Pardon me, 1 second. Let me get a drink really quick. If you like emergency, a really good drink is a small bit of water with emergency in it. And then you put a LaCroix or an AHA or a bubbly over the top, so it makes it almost like an orange soda. It's really good. Pro tip for you. So here are the questions that we want to answer. First, how do you build the game well in an underdeveloped area where you're going to receive no help? And what structures can you use to help you do that? That's the question for Henry, right? The other question that we want to answer is, how do players develop best? How do you become the best player that you possibly can? And it's not even, I almost don't even mean to say player. I almost mean to say human, because it's all interrelated and it's all based on how to be a good player, right? Like you talk about it in business, you talk about it in other things like that, where if you know someone is a great team player, you know that they are going to do their part. They're going to pick up where they, with oh, sorry, we got some wineage. That they're basically going to do their part. But so we'll see if he lays back down. I'm hoping he will. Okay, so staying on track. The reason we want to know why certain things are better than others is not only well, it's kind of funny because the way that they outline it, it makes perfect sense, and it falls right in line with the idea of creating a great environment for players so that they'll fall in love with the game. So Ted referenced a speech. It wasn't a therapist, a speech researcher, and he basically talked about the idea that when you are learning language, you have to almost acquire the language before you have to learn within the language, right? Like you can't learn a language very well. It's really just something that you do. And it seems very counterintuitive that as you're trying to, the best way to learn a language is to be immersed within it, right? Like if you want to learn how to speak Spanish, you go somewhere where they're always speaking Spanish, and it doesn't really matter where it is, but so you start because you're just flooded with it, right? And that was kind of the second point that he made, was basically that acquisition is before learning. And so we're going to build in a couple of other points and kind of explain why this is. So there are two things that they mention within it, and it's fluency and accuracy. Fluency is essentially, if you're speaking in language, how much you can, like you just know how to navigate through it entirely. You know every which way to go. And so if you think about that in a lacrosse context or a sports context, it means that you understand all of the play mechanics within it just because you almost feel it. You don't have to think through it. You don't have to make any, extra things. You just know exactly which problem-solving device to use for whatever problem you have, and you go through it and you do it. But you didn't learn language by someone sitting down and teaching you. Like you might have learned spelling that way, but you didn't learn language that way. And it's the same with lacrosse. And so the way this works in a free play environment is essentially with the following four things. So within play, the first thing you have is communication, then decision-making, then execution, and then fitness. And so I literally just listened to this podcast like an hour ago as I was on a walk, and I'm going to do my best to explain how they walk through each one. And I really liked it because it gave I'm not going to do it justice, but it gave a very articulated view on things that I experienced when I was growing up playing. And so it's something that basically I didn't need to reorient my mind to figure out. It was like I had already had that story told within my life, and therefore this is how it's going to be. So the first one's communication. And any defensive coach is going to tell you, yeah, of course you got to communicate. But that's not what he means. What he means, it can be vocal, but what he really means is how to communicate with every other player on the field. So you think about wind-up dodging. As you're winding up, you're communicating to everyone else on the field that you're going to shoot. Now, whether you take that action or not is up to you. But so you're communicating with the player who is on ball. You're also communicating to the player who is to his left and his right. If you're the offensive player, and then the left and the right might have to slide, so you're also communicating to them. All of your body language is communication. In order to score, they go through this. You have to move a goalie in order to create space to finish. And Ted tells a story of a young man playing in their pickup leagues, and they play with like 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and they all play together with this softer ball. And he tells a story of this 10-year-old who, turns a corner, and he has an opportunity to shoot, and the first thing he does, he tries to shoot it like extremely hard as he can, and he hits it, and it goes way up in the air. And then you see the second time he gets this opportunity, and he kicks it, and he kind of takes a little off, but it hits the 5-year-old goalie like right in the face. And the 5-year-old goalie kind of just froze because he was like scared that he was going to get hit. But now, because they use a softer ball, he wasn't scared anymore. So then the third time he went up, the player kind of had to finesse it. But so each iteration of this experience of when he got to shoot was completely different. And so he mentioned it, I want to say 5-6 times, that every single time you touch the ball is 100% new. So you think of the best soccer players in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, Neymar, Wayne Rooney, they have never kicked the soccer ball the exact same way twice. And the reason why they are able to do it so well is because they have fluency. They can adapt to each situation. And so the reason why you must acquire the game, and by acquiring the game, they almost mean you have to develop a love for the game first, is because that is how they are going to, well, really, you just don't learn other ways. So I think back to math class, and this could turn out to be a very bad analogy, but I always thought I had my mind could just do a lot of problems really easy. Like times tables were simple for me. Division was relatively simple for me. But then once you got into algebra, other things of that nature, I wouldn't show my work because I was overconfident, and then I would have to go back and relearn it. But so as I went back and relearned it, I actually did much better after the fact, not only because I had seen the where I was wrong, but because I had to find a new way to get through the problem, the correct way to get through the problem. And so you see all of those memes online where they have, x, like bracketed x plus 1 bracket divided by x plus 5 or whatever. And if you don't know PEMDAS and you don't know the order of operations, you get it wrong. But so it's essentially the idea of figuring out how to navigate through it by yourself. Sometimes you're obviously going to get your errors, but you're going to have to go back through it. That actually was a pretty bad analogy, it seems, to that now. Although for someone who's trying to figure out something new in math, it is more of a guess and check. You have to kind of go through it and just play. So I want to get to a different section of this. Okay, well, you've got communication first, then you have decision making. And essentially what you show the field is going to determine what you get back. That's your communication piece. Then you have your decision-making piece, which is the player who came up and he took his 3 shots. And depending on what happens, you're going to have to make different decisions. Then you have execution, which is whether it, was a positive or a negative, whether you succeeded or didn't. And then apparently fitness is last, because if you're just playing, you continually utilize your fitness. And so I think through this in my own practice planning and ideas, and I know we need structure within our high school game, and I know that the players will do well if they have a structure, and I then need to let it go and let them find the looks they want to find. So I've talked about this many times before, mentioned it a couple times, but I have a tendency of over controlling the coaching. And the funny thing is, like, when I build my playbooks, many times I build so many different images because there's so many different possibilities, and the possibilities are based on the ball carrier's actions. What players don't seem to see as I lay this out is that I'm really just building every different decision. So you can make whatever decision you want. The key is that you then go through it and see each scenario, figure out which ones you like, figure out which ones you play well in, figure out which ones allow you to succeed, and then you do those over and over again. And so as we get into the idea of free play, I want to mention an article that Henry had brought up to me that he felt was pertinent in in our conversation that he sent me. And let's see. So it's basically called Range Slow Learning. That's what the title of the PDF says, but it's essentially learning fast and slow. And it hits me in math class, right? So basically, as they do the testing, and I skimmed through this, I didn't actually read through it, but it made sense as I read the conclusion, was that if you have an inherent nature for something and you can kind of just do it, sometimes that actually sets you back, because your pathway to success, like take me, my times tables were always really easy. The very slight division was very easy. I felt like I should always just be good with it. And therefore, when I hit a snag, I kind of I figured I should have just been good at it, which is why you got to praise hard work instead of just you're going to be good at it. But they tested these individuals, and the individuals that tested best at first actually ended up being worse later on, because they didn't get the experiences of learning how to adapt in the situation to navigate many multiple possibilities as they had gone through it. So essentially, if you cruise through an easy pathway over and over again, you may never learn how to, navigate through the woods. That's my analogy. I guess it kind of makes sense, I guess, but it's mainly just talking. You have to have what's the word? You have to have the resistance in order to, gain from whatever experience you have. And so essentially within these problems and within free play, players have to have and encounter the ability to play against players who are better than them as well as worse than them. And that's the next part we're going to get through. But the idea is, if you're always just good at something, you're not going to meet the natural resistance that you should to be, better. But so now there are two terms, and he explained them in a way that I'm probably going to make sure that they'll be explained correctly, but he had another reference for them about overload. So it's overload and underload. Basically, players who are brand new to the sport playing against players who have played the sport are going to be overloaded, right? There's going to be too much for them to actually hit upon. They're not going to, it's just overloaded, right? They have to think while they're doing it. And so as players are thinking while they are playing, their brains are overloaded. Everything we want to do, we want it to be natural, right? And you don't get to that natural spot without making decisions over and over and over again and building your capacity to make the correct decisions. And so the interesting thing that everybody or that they started talking about was the idea of underloading. So Coach Monroe, he would do a lot of pickup games within his community, and so basically playing 3-by, and he would have some of the Division I players, the Division I recruits, come to play against, him and his daughter's team. And what he was shocked to find was that the Division I players who were playing against, him and his daughter, was that they actually benefited a ton from experiencing play in an underload situation. So basically, if you are the better player, I don't want to say it's even don't have to try as hard, essentially, but if you have time to think and it kind of slows the game down for you, you have the ability to try out things you wouldn't do against elite competition, right? So there's a thought process that you always want to be playing against the best. And I can say that might be true, but you never get the opportunity playing against the best to try out new things because everything has to be very structured, right? But then if you are playing against the best, you might be in that overload state. And if you're in the overload state and you're thinking, you're not going to be creating You're not going to be creating the unconscious ability to play that you want to. And so another thing about this is if you're in an underload situation, you're never thinking about whether or not you're going to be successful or not. You're just playing. So one of the things they touched on quite a bit was the idea of just enjoying the act of playing, but they didn't use those terms. It was more so, it's kind of hard to explain. Let's say you have a player who's really, really good dodging down the alley, and he's got that, that fire shot, and he hits it sometimes and sometimes he doesn't. And in a game where he is very, very challenged, where his competition is, right up with him and in his hands the whole time, he's definitely going to rely on his ability to, I don't know if that's a good analogy. If someone's in his hands and he's playing against elite competition, he's going to do what he's always done because he knows it can be successful and he knows he's done it. But if he's playing against someone that he knows that he can, for lack of a better term, toy with, he's then going to extrapolate new ideas and new things to allow him to benefit his game. So you think about the Deemer has it all the time. The answer move, right? Essentially a step back throwback, but instead you step back to a step down. And so you're dodging your offhand side. So if I'm right-handed, I would be dodging down the right side goalie view. And as I went down far enough, I would step away, turn my hips to get my right hand on the outside of the field, and then I would shoot across my body. But so if you haven't seen the answer move, check out First Class Lacrosse, their Instagram, and you'll see it everywhere. You might even be able to do a hashtag answer move. I'm not quite sure. But the idea is that without the ability to play against players who aren't quite as good as you are, you never have the freedom to, You never have the freedom to try out those new things. Now, I'm going to put this in another context. So one of the things that our team has struggled with consistently, and that all of my teams have struggled with, simply because I have, because I'm so cerebral and I know I can create the looks I want to see, sometimes I don't allow players to play freely, right? Which I'm working on. And we're playing a lot more than we have in the past in any of my practices. And I'm really starting to embrace all of this free play, and I'm excited to see where I take it to, because I think, hey, if you have a one-year-old and they want to play lacrosse later, they'll be friends with Turner and they'll play 3x in the backyard every day. I don't have a backyard yet, though, so we'll have to wait on that. But utilizing the free play allows the players to be in and experience it quicker. But so the whole title of this podcast was The Long Way Round, right? Allow players to take the long way. And it relates to the article that Henry had, which essentially the people who did worse at first had to navigate through and learn it. They weren't just good at it, so they had to, I don't really even want to say just dedicate themselves to it, but it kind of is that. They had to experience it in multiple ways so that they could find the right path. And that's what you're doing within your free play. You're allowing players to experience it in a way that is just random. And the randomness part of it is what matters, right? It's not necessarily something where it's always going to be the same, because you don't want that person, right? You think about the Boston Dynamics robots. They can have some robots that do some pretty cool things. And just so you're clear, there are some mock-up ones that are done with, not mock-up ones, what do you call that? It's not Photoshop either. Either way, if you ever see one of the ones where they've got guns in it, or they have... So, okay, we're talking Boston Dynamic robots, and the reason we're talking about it is because perceiving the world is extremely difficult. That's why if you see the Boston Dynamics robot videos, they always have those, what I originally called a spider link, which is a QR code on everything. And the reason that the QR code is on it is because that's the only way that they can tell the computer exactly what that item is. Because if you think about a two-dimensional surface that is referencing essentially a screen, which is how they would communicate the world, until you put the code in of the QR code, they can't distinguish where something ends and then something begins at a level that would allow them to act in the world like a human would. That's actually extremely, extremely difficult. And free play allows players to see things differently every single time. And so I'm going to bring the talk with Ted to a conclusion by mentioning that he talks about other soccer clubs within the restrung. I will in just a minute. He talks about different clubs who are playing, and he mentions that they, apparently it's a Ukrainian club, and they have this way of doing things that is just so methodical, right? They're beautiful drills. If you've ever seen the World Series, the Little League World Series, the Japanese team, they do these passing drills where they're throwing through the infield and throwing through the outfield, and it's so crisp and perfect. And for baseball, it actually might work really well because the only fielding you really need to do is off of different types of hits, right? But if you got a guy on first, your first look is always going to be to second base, or it might be to first base if it's too late, or the reads are always very similar. But basically, the beauty of this person's drills were, they were crisp, they were perfect. And however, when he asked him to name all of the players who had come out of the program, the first one that he named was actually someone who had joined the program when they were 12. So it's not like they brought up. And so essentially what happened was that person was actually a player who had developed on the street. And you think about it, all of the best players for, I want to say like NBA, like Allen Iverson, like Kobe Bryant, like they obviously put in more time like LeBron James, but they have I don't think that they would be as good as they were without that free play. But so, basically those groups, his organization would lose to teams early because the kids did not have the organizational nature to create a framework through free play, whereas the other teams were instructed to do so. So you think about the natural movements of a 6-year-old. They're all going to go to the ball. It's all comet ball. Now, if you can get 2 players on that field to understand and you yell at them and you make them go in these directions and you make them stay apart, one pass scores a goal. Now, over time, what will happen is in the other organizations, they will have these methodical drills. They will win through their framework. Then those kids will get beat out by the players who are playing freely in other places. They will come in and then they will beat everyone. And then those kids will leave because they'll get beat out by the other players who've been playing through freely. And the reason is because if a player understands how to play the game in these capacities, he can be put in any place. And so once the teams hit 16 to 17 years old, they would dominate everything because they had the ability to read and react and adapt to each situation in a way where the other kids with frameworks couldn't. And so you need the framework. Like for high school, if we don't have a framework for our offense and our defense, there's not enough time to develop a player, some of the players who we get in that amount of time to have them react in the way that we would want them to react. And so we essentially have to have that framework in order to have success, but that's the name of the game at our level, right? At the varsity high school level, the name of the game is winning the game. And, coaches are hired and fired because of it. Like it's the point. Like the point is to win at this level when it's not the point at the youth level. And so the way this then, I guess, which way do I want to take it? So to culminate the idea with Henry is, as he is trying to grow lacrosse in Montana, one of the ideas that I had, and this is something that any parent can do, like if you have a goal and you have a backyard, or you have a field you can use, and you have your son or daughter or whoever, and they have 3 friends, they can play. And they should just go and they should just be allowed to just go play. And that experience will allow them to learn the game in a way that others can't. Like I remember when I was growing up, we would play one-on-one, right? Like as many kids as there is essentially, I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube, but it's one on everyone. And, it'd be fun and you'd have to learn it, and you would just react. It would build the subconscious way that you'd need to play because, no one's coming with you. Now, did it work really well from I want to pick up the ball and move it perspective. Not at all. It was actually the exact opposite. But any reaction was novel. It was always subconscious. So in order to build it in Montana, an idea I had is if you can get, I don't know, if you can get a few parents who are willing to stay in touch with and contact a couple of other kids and say, hey, Friday at 5, we'll be out there, we're going to play. And, the parents can hop in too. That's the thing is, I think one of the main things I would love to see in lacrosse is more men's to women's crossed games, right? 3x is not a game with any pads. Men can play it, women can play it, right? Women's teams are playing box a lot more now. And it's something where the division in the sport isn't necessary. Like you can play with, men's and women's together. It's not like, it's just like soccer is how I should say it. Like the whole contact portion of the game isn't actually that important to playing the game until you hit the organization of the sport, and the sport is not the game. But so I'd love to see more men's and women's teams playing together. Okay, so I had a question that I want to get to because he had said it. Now, if you guys are on Instagram, that is my computer. See if there you go. All right. Okay, so can you define free play? Just set them up and let them go, or what, or one path, or some of both? So for me, it comes down to constraints. So I think it's this book. Where is it? This is Nonlinear Pedagogy. The green one around here somewhere is called The Constraints Approach. So essentially, you can create different games where players are allowed to essentially do whatever they want, but they have a goal, right? So you always need a goal. You always need a target in everything, sports and life and everything, because if you don't, you actually have no perception. Nothing is better than the other. So to make a joke that Jordan Peterson made, you think about that joke, who came first? Why did the chicken cross the road? And the reason is because something was better across the road than where they were. And so if you don't have a positive thing to move towards, or something that is deemed to be more positive, you've got nowhere to go. So let's take a question that was asked. One of the drills I have is called the triangle approach drill, and it's a defensive drill. And essentially you create a triangle and you're essentially learning how to approach to dictate an angle. And there's a whole game to it, but it's outdated. I would never run it again. What I would do is I would do a drill called force box, which is what TJ Buchanan put into the European lacrosse coaches discussion group, which is essentially defend the bucket, but it's created in another way. So imagine that you have a square, right? One player will start here, the other will start here. Now, the offense's job is to get to the defensive player's cone. So they're on opposite corners for people who are just listening. They're on opposite corners. The defensive player will throw the ball to the offensive player and then get into the middle of the field, and the offensive player will catch it, and he will have to bring the ball to the cone that the original defender was defending. If he can touch the cone, he wins. If he doesn't touch the cone, he loses. And now you think in terms of, and if he gets pushed out of the box, he loses too. So he has to get to the cone by moving around the defender without going out of the box. And so this also teaches turning the corner as well, which I think is very cool. But so I would classify that as a free play game, because each player is able to play freely within the context of that game, because that is its own little game. Now, I also think drills that, we've been using a bunch of new Farmingdale drills. Once again, if you don't follow the Farmingdale Twitter, make sure you do. Their drills like their matchup drill, their best game ever, their, I want to say it's diplomat drill, which is the side-to-side. We actually haven't used that one yet, but we will. And basically just allowing them to play freely. So 4v3 drills, 3v2 drills, where there's no structure. Now, if you're trying to build in your picks or something, you can add in one of the things that Farmingdale does, and this is a genius idea, is have different colored balls, right? So you have let's just say you have white, yellow, orange. Within those 3 balls, if you throw in a white ball, it's just play. If you throw in a yellow ball, you have to get a pick. If you throw in an orange ball, you have to get some kind of off-ball pick, or I forget exactly which motions and things that they used, but it was just a great idea as far as how to make them kind of do something. But so I would say free play is not just roll the ball out and go, but it is something where it's allow them to make the decisions that they want to make. So right now we have a framework for our offense that I feel I think it's going to be good. I like it. But on Monday, I'm trying not to give away much on the actual podcast. Like, I can talk through all my stuff on my Coaches Only Q&A, which, by the way, is tomorrow. But either way, I'll just say it like this. So in our last, not bubble game, but the Foothills Fieldhouse game, which is essentially field lacrosse 10-on-10 in an indoor kind of arena, we played Mountain Vista, and they pressed us, right? And so our guys who were trying to figure out our structure had trouble getting into the structure because they were pressured. Now, if they had been playing in a free play thing where they didn't have to do a certain thing, where their goal wasn't this, like, then they're just attacking the goal, right? And so if someone tries to overplay them, they can then back cut them, and they weren't quite used to doing that in that game when they should have just been playing freely. So building in and making sure that they are okay with the free play dynamics as they're getting into their structure is huge. And that's the thing where their skills are going to improve more if they're not thinking than if they have to think about it, in the same way you would learn language and all of the other things. Okay, so I've got a couple more. Let's see, we got a what's up. I thought I saw another question somewhere. Manyomo said 5 on a die. We shall see. That's nice. So, here we go. Got to get up. It's hard to read. Absolutely, Adam. I am planning on doing them all. I need to experience them first, though. So, Adam just asked if I was planning on doing videos on the Farmingdale Drills, and I definitely am planning on doing videos on those drills. And I think that they will be, a lot shorter than many of my most recent drills, because, my most recent things have been a lot more like teaching the game. What are things called? How do you attack certain things? And I think that what's the word? One of the things that Ted in that podcast said was that there are all of these moves in, definitely, Adam, definitely the PDFs too. So there are all these moves that are titled after players. Like, there's the Neymar, there's the Maradona, there's all these things. And that the thing that he really wanted to make clear was that all of the people who, that even though they were named after those people, that that those players had seen those moves take place in a field somewhere way before they had done them, and then had them named after them, right? So basically, that even though you call something doesn't necessarily mean it's not just a part of what the game is. Like, I think through, I've been doing all of the recent videos. So if you don't follow POWLAX on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Definitely do, because and it said you only have to follow one, because I post basically the same thing each day on each of them in little subtle different ways. But we go over the idea of how do you defend a fade? What happens if something beats you? And all of kind of the mechanics of the game. But the key is that the mechanics don't matter. What matters is that the players understand how to play in individual situations. It goes back to the conversation that Patrick from Lax Film Room and I had at the IMLCA convention, where we discussed, the key to clearing is understanding a 2-on-1. And if you can play out the 2-on-1s, you're good to go. And so I'm going to go back through all of these and make sure I kind of hit my points on the whole idea of free play. So I'm going to work through them backwards, because I think, okay, and I have to add one more because I didn't even get to one. So in the mirror is something that Ted says a lot. He talks about things being in the mirror. And what in the mirror means is, are you being evaluated, right? Are you watching yourself? Are you looking in the mirror? Are your players, as they're experiencing the game, getting hectic feedback every single time? And you may think that that is what you want them to do, like Pavlov, right? So classical conditioning, Pavlov's dogs. The dogs got immediate stimulus after they heard a bell, so much that the bell would make them salivate, right? Now, in order to train, say, a 1-year-old what to do and what not to do, you want to make sure that whatever they do wrong, that they get a worldly stimulus right after, so they connect the two things. And as a parent, what you're trying to do is be the world, so that when they hit the world, people aren't rolling their eyes at them, and kids want to play with them, right? They want to be good players in life, not just in games. And the idea that we need to make sure we're giving constant feedback is incorrect, because the game will give its own feedback, right? So I've been saying this a little bit later. The game will sell itself. If you allow and you create an environment where the player enjoys the game will sell itself, and that player will get much better than a player who doesn't enjoy the scenario of coming out to play, right? So we have a few players right now who just, you can tell that they love learning about the game. Even though they're not the best player, they love interacting with the game and they love learning the game. And that's very encouraging, because you see them learning in their own ways, and they don't always, they know when they screw up, even though they have no experience with the game really. So now we're going to go back through underload versus overload. So overload is where you have to think about what you're doing in the act of what you're doing. So the other players are often better. You have to really, you're overloaded by the challenge that's ahead of you, right? And so I don't know that I'm explaining that too well, but then you also have underload, which is if you don't have to think about what's going on around you at all, you have the opportunity to elaborate further upon your own skill and try brand new things because you don't care. Now, if you ever care, you're going to be less free to just go and do. And so that's one of the things we want to make sure our players have the ability to do, is that they have the ability to play freely within the context of drills. They have the ability to push their boundaries. Now, that gets really frustrating in competition, but you see it. They talk about this. They talk about the showcases, right? My player is always so good in practice, or so good when they're just playing 3-by and playing pickup game, but then they get into this showcase and they can't do it. They're not very good. And it's because they're in the mirror, right? They're watching themselves. They're being very cautious about what they're doing. And that's definitely something that you don't want them to have. You know, they're going to know that it matters, but if they play freely, they're going to be better for it. Next thing, and so by being in an underload situation, you have the opportunity to expand upon your skills. Next, we have that we've got the language laws, which is essentially that acquisition happens before learning. So and I think this is the idea of kind of a framework almost, but the framework is not in the sense of having an offense or having a defensive strategy. A framework is not a strategy, even though I used framework in the spot of strategy earlier. I'll hopefully not do that again, but that's the point of this whole thing, is that I get to talk through the ideas and I get to figure out which ones are where. But so a framework for the game is essentially for me like the base skills in certain contexts that happen automatically, right? For me, I catch a ball with my right hand. A defenseman's coming with his stick out in front of me. He's about to throw a poke check. I know, like, I don't even have to think about protecting my stick. It just happens. And it was actually funny when I played at CU that fall. There was a kid I played with in high school who went to Regis named Max. And there was a freshman the year I was a junior who was there, who had just come from high school. And Max threw like the lightest slap check and just, perfectly timed, perfectly placed to just the space in front of the offensive player's chest. And he had no idea what to do. It got hit, the ball fell on the ground. And then I was up next. And so that was a nice, easy split that went, easily protected. But it was because I had acquired the framework for the game that allowed it to kind of be automatic. I don't think I'm using the correct words for that, but it's how I'm thinking of it in my head. So I might be having something different in framework. Now, let's see. So you have to acquire a love for the sport prior to learning within the sport. And by learning, they mean things like wall ball, things like, what's the word? Things like wall ball, things like shooting on your own, things of that nature that are not playing the game. So you have to play the game because you got to acquire love for the game. The other thing, and so we'll talk about this in the idea of play. So play is communication first, decision-making second, execution third, fitness fourth. So by communication, they mean everything. They mean vocal. They mean how someone's playing you. So as a defenseman comes towards me with his stick out, he is communicating to me that he's going to be defending me, that he's going to push me if I get too close. He's communicating the act of playing defense on me. The off-ball players are communicating, hey, I might slide. Hey, I might not slide. I can communicate to them, hey, I passed the ball by throwing a fake, but I really didn't, right? So you can use deceptive tactics within that communication. Then once you lay out the ideas for this communication, you then have the idea of decision making. So once you communicate and once communication is being had with everyone on the field, whether it's throwing a fake for a goalie or whatever the communication is that we just talked about, then you have a decision that you can make based on what's being communicated to you from you to all these points. So one of the problems that I see a ton is that players who are in a position to catch a ball and score a goal aren't presenting their stick. They're not, it's as if they canceled themselves out without being there. So the analogy I always use with them is, who decides in football, who decides if a wide receiver is open? And oftentimes they'll be like, well, the receiver does. And it's like, no, the quarterback does. The quarterback decides if the receiver is open. The receiver has to be open and be able to catch the ball at all times. Then you have execution, which is whether you do it right or wrong, and that's where you get your positive and negative feedback, which the game gives automatically. We don't always have to give it. And then you have your fitness element, which is essentially just playing the game. You're going to get fitter as you are running around doing things like that. The final thing, and I think I actually skipped over this because I put it above it in my notes, is that relationships are first. So kids who are going to play a game are going to build better relationships with the people than they will if they are standing in a line doing, what we call ninja dojo shooting, where you're essentially just making the actions over and over again. And that by playing the game, that the relationships blossom because there is none of that in the mirror stress of, all of the always evaluations. Like this has been consistent with POWLAX, is as we've done a lot more 3-by, players have gotten much better, much quicker, much better decision makers, just simply because they are put in those situations more often than they would if it was something that I had designed, a drill that I had designed. It doesn't mean that the drill cannot, it doesn't mean that the drill doesn't, Well, so I don't mean drill in the terms of it's a drill, therefore there's no free play. I mean that sometimes the drills do require that free thinking. Oh, last thing. And so we are hitting the hour mark on Instagram. So I'll get this in right before we hit it. But the idea of becoming fluent, and some of the soccer players that they talked to, was that doing things in the easiest manner is the best way to get it done, right? You don't want to go through, and you don't want to do things in ways that are not as easy as others. And so I just thought that was a good point that I probably should have weaved in somewhere else, but then didn't. So yeah, that was pretty good. So on Instagram, we had 64 viewers. Now, noted, most of those people came in, got a little hi from me because I say hi to everyone, and then they bounced. But that was pretty good. But so yeah, so that wraps up today's live stream, the POWLAX podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to hit the little talking points again. Best announcement of the day is that we are expecting in September. Super excited about it. Very, very excited about it. Very, very grateful for all of the people who are the patrons on Patreon. I want to say we're at like 460 now, which is just incredible to me. Thank you very much. You guys are the reason I'm allowed to do what I do. Got a lot of very cool videos coming, especially if things get shut down. I'll be able to do some more work, which is nice. And let's see. If you're looking for lacrosse balls, definitely get Pearl lacrosse balls. They do not grease up, and you will not have to buy balls as often as you would if you did not get the Pearl lacrosse balls. And then also, if you are looking for a way for your players to develop better shooting, make sure you put something in the goal. Don't let them shoot against an empty net, and use the flip goalie trainers. Use code POWLAX at pearllacrosse.com and flipgoalie.com for 10% off, and it will help out the channel. All right. That is all. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully I made some good points. This is more on the actual podcast way because I was just able to kind of talk through some ideas that I'm learning, which I really enjoy. And that's the reason we started the podcast to begin with. So not so much a production, but an opportunity for me to elaborate on my ideas. And I felt I should go listen to like the first one because I think I've gotten much better at not just talking to talk and to really pause and, think through what I'm saying more so than other things. But so appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. Have a good one. And I will see you guys. It might be the same schedule. Actually, I think it is the same schedule next week because Turner's off school because they have spring break. And so we'll see if